Alright everyone, and welcome to the Highland Collector YouTube channel. Now 2023 has been a pretty solid year for the Black Series, for the most part, because we did see some truly incredible figures this year, with a few genuinely being some of the greatest of all time. However, with over 100 figures released this year alone, it was inevitable that there would be some stinkers amongst them, as in addition to these masterpieces, we also got our fair share of disappointments, inaccurate representations, alongside some really shitty repaints. And with 2024 fast approaching, I thought it would be a fun idea to go over my top 10 worst Black Series figures of 2023, from the mainline, exclusives, and even figures that are a part of a multi-pack. I will be covering the worst of the worst. However, I will not be including any forms of repacks, which is great news for both Ahsoka and also Skiff-Guard Lando, as they will both avoid any more criticism for now. And before we start, it goes without saying, but this list is my opinion, and if you do like any of the figures I'm about to mention, that's good for you. I just don't really care for them. And also another warning, if you're someone who hates any form of negativity and loves to dick ride Hasbro, I would recommend you click off this video now. But with that being said, coming in at the number 10 spot is a figure I really wanted to like, and it is of course Balon Skull, who is a more recent mainline release from Wave 40 and was the 9th figure of the Ahsoka line. And when he was first revealed a few months back, he actually looked pretty solid, and it was the Shin Hati figure that was getting all the hate for the questionable renders of her head sculpt. Yet in the turn of events, the official product for Shin looked way better than expected, whilst Balon received all of the hate, but for good reasons, because although there are definitely positives to this figure with the return of Malgus's huge blade, and some nice new molds including the face that has a decent likeness, but the big issue here is the scaling, as this figure is just too small. Like, he's ridiculously undersized. I mean, on his own, sure, he looks great, but when displayed with other figures, the cracks really begin to show, as he is the same size as Shin, which is just quite honestly a joke, as Balon Skull is portrayed in the show as this massive intimidating mercenary, which is shown not only by his heavy lightsaber style, but also through the casting of the late great Ray Stevenson, who was a behemoth of a man, which is probably why he was cast in the role. And his powerful stature unfortunately has not been captured by Hasbro in this action figure. Of course there are fixes to this problem which makes this into a great figure. I know Land Speeder Luke has a good one with the use of Reaver's legs, but quite honestly it shouldn't have released with any problems like this in the first place, because Balon's size is such an important aspect of the character, and to not have it incorporated in the official release is a shame, especially because all the parts are there. All they needed to do was make him a bit taller and a bit broader, and if Hasbro had done that, it would have made for a truly amazing figure. And although I feel like some figures are technically worse, his height not being right is such a fuck up. Balon needed to be on this list. Now next up at the number 9 spot is actually another figure based off the Ahsoka show, yeah, get used to hearing that, and it's actually Morgan Elsbeth, who was the 4th figure in the lineup, and again it was a mainline release from Wave 39. Now I actually didn't mind the character of Elsbeth from the show. I thought she was a pretty interesting villain, and this release here marks our first ever Black Series Nightsister figure, which should be exciting, yet this one is just kind of underwhelming. But to be fair to her, I think this figure has some really strong elements. Definitely looks the part, as the likeness on her is incredible to the point where it almost saved her from this list. However, like I said, this figure is just kind of mediocre. It's not super interesting, and I think that comes down to the fact that she has a rather basic design in the first place, and also there's no accessories included with her at all that add to the value, making it hard to justify paying full price for this one. Like, people are annoyed at the fact there was no Beskar staff, though I do understand not including that because by the time Ahsoka takes place it had been melted down into Grogu's chainmail, but still, the least they could have done was added the map, which was such a massive MacGuffin in the first half of the series, and Hasbro had so many chances to include it with figures, and honestly not seeing it with Elsbeth just makes me a little salty, as that little gold orb could have gone a long way. But alas, I guess many of us will just be waiting for Hasbro to release her cooler look from episode 8 with the creepy Nightsister face and the blade of Talzin. I know for sure my number 8 pick is going to make many people angry, as I am again going to touch on a rather controversial topic. But the gaming great Scorch, supposedly based off Republic Commando, had to make the list. If you're a regular viewer of my channel, you already know I'm not a massive fan of the Black Series Clone Commandos, and I think Hasbro has done an overall shit job with the Delta Squad figures. Sure, it's awesome we're finally getting figures based off this beloved cult game, but if this is how they're going to turn out, I don't want them, as the use of the Hunter body has plagued these guys, because as seen with Scorch, he just looks too small despite being the best of the lot. As the entire point of Clone Commandos is that they're bulky, powerful reinforcement shown by their upgraded beefy armour that helps them stand out from the rakes, yet that is not translated here at all. And honestly, it baffles me to why Hasbro just didn't give us an entirely new Clone Commando body that actually looks good and is accurate, considering they have released 5 of them by now, and if they had just invested a little more and made a good mould, they would not have split the entire community in half. And for some stupid reason, people actually try and defend Hasbro's laziness by claiming that this is his look based off the Clone Wars, where Commandos admittedly have a smaller design, which would be fine if firstly Hasbro released them as Clone Wars figures in the yellow boxes, and also if they had Clone Wars artwork on the box as well. But no, this artwork is based off the incredible design from the game, and is what Scorch should look like in all of his glory. And even though this figure may look like shit, at least we got a pretty cool unique backpack out of it. So Scorch is fully deserving of that 8 spot in my opinion, as he's such a disappointment, but in a way less so, as we already knew from the other figures that he was going to turn out shit regardless. In at my number 7 spot, it's another figure from the Gaming Greats line, and it is the deluxe battle damaged Grievous based on his rare skin from Battlefront 2, and this is basically just a repainted Grievous figure. But this release gives him some new paint apps in the form of some battle damage across his body, which admittedly does look kind of cool, yet is nothing super special or exciting. And it would have been way better if Hasbro went the extra mile and recreated his legendary shattered armor skin instead, which not only has the various scuff marks seen, but also includes his torn up cape, missing earpiece, melted face and exposed organs. I mean, even Funko opted to make this superior version, whilst Hasbro expected us to pay the same deluxe price for a Grievous that has less to offer than the original, as that's right, this one is missing his cape. And also, yes, this Grievous is still massively underscaled too, of course they wouldn't go out of their way and fix that. Right, so with my number 6 pick, we're actually back to the Ahsoka show with Marrick, who is number 8 in the Ahsoka line and is another figure I really wanted to love, because there's definitely a good figure in there somewhere, and it's just Hasbro's incredibly poor execution that made this one a massive letdown, and that's mainly because of the paint apps, as the new sculpts for this guy's armour and especially helmet are actually quite epic. And I do really like Marrick's design from the show, and to give Hasbro credit, the molds here are actually really good, but like I said, it is the paint that ruins this one for me, as for whatever reason they decided to use this light grey colour for the main armour plates that looks really jarring. But the real culprit to why this one turned out so ugly is the rust detailing, which just went way too far. The orange used is too bold and not subtle in the slightest, adding unnecessary rust details to his legs, which are supposed to be cloth trousers. And overall it just detracts so much, especially when that awkward orange paint is contrasted with the light grey, as it makes this figure really unappealing to look at, and is reminiscent to one of those shitty credit collection figures. In fact, it may somehow be even worse than them. However, similar to Balon, the pieces are there for us to put in the hard work and customize him ourselves, but again, that shouldn't be our jobs. Hasbro should be releasing these figures with the highest level of accuracy and quality, especially if they keep wanting to up their prices. But speaking of shitty half-baked paint jobs, in at number 5 is our first carbonized figure, and that is carbonized Nedb, who released in this Obi-Wan Kenobi themed Amazon exclusive 2-pack alongside this shiny Purge Trooper, who, let's be clear, is not on this list because, as you may know, in the past I have admitted to kind of liking the carbonized figures, not all of them obviously. But if it makes sense to give a particular figure a shiny makeover, I'm all for it. Yet that could just be the Funko collector in me, as in that community we are used to getting repaints like this. Nevertheless, Nedb is a droid I definitely don't think is deserving of this kind of repaint, and honestly I'd rather have nothing than have this, as this release here just screams of Hasbro trying to move unwanted stock. As let's be honest, this droid may have had a cool design, but he's far from one of the greatest, and is honestly quite forgettable. But the main reason to why this release annoys me so much is that the entire purpose of Nedb is that he's an old hunk of scrap. He's meant to look rusty and old, so making him all pretty and vibrant is just pointless. If anything, Hasbro should have released a second variant in which he had more detailing and weathering, making him more accurate in the process. Then we could have gotten carbonized figures that actually could have worked a lot better, and would have been more well received, like Phasma, the Mandalorian, Django or 3PO. Instead though, carbonized Nedb exists, and he's definitely one of the most useless, arbitrary and needless Black Series figures of all time, and despite this he's still not the worst carbonized had to offer in 2023. Right, so for my number 4 spot I'm going with Djar Morak, who was a mainline release based off of Mando Season 2 Episode 7, the one where both Din Djarin and Migs Mayfield break into an Imperial facility with these tank trooper disguises. And because the Migs Mayfield figure released a couple years ago now I think, this one is basically just a head swap, with the only differences being the head obviously and also some minor weathering details. And yes, although it is nice to have both of these guys, to me this figure is just incredibly mediocre and uninteresting, because we seem to get just so many different Mandalorian / Din Djarins that unless there's one which has a massive improvement or new amazing features, it's hard to get excited for them. Especially in this case because not only have we pretty much seen this figure before, but the head sculpt, the one thing that's new and the only thing they had to put effort into, is not that great. Like, it doesn't really look like Pedro Pascal at all, and at the end of the day this is just a rather shit filler figure that no one really wants, although that could just be my personal grudge against it, as for months now this one singular Din Djarin has been the only Black Series figure at my local Sniffs Toys. No one seems to want him. But we're in the top 3 now. My third pick is the Return of the Jedi 40th Anniversary Red Darth Vader, which is just another Vader but red, as Hasbro seems to be releasing an entire rainbow of Vaders. But jokes aside, this release as a Hasbro Pulse exclusive to celebrate Jedi's 40th, and is meant to have a paint job that pays homage to the original Revenge of the Jedi poster by trying to capture the poster's unique art style. And I do appreciate when Hasbro releases celebratory figures that reference Star Wars history, but at the same time, don't be fooled, this is just another easy repaint for them. That doesn't look particularly good either. It's a textbook low effort credit collection looking figure, and whilst the maroon cape is a nice touch I guess, it's those red splodges across his body that really put me off this look. And another complaint I have is that Hasbro actually failed to accurately translate this figure, as on the poster Vader clearly has a blue lightsaber, but for whatever reason is released with his red one, so it definitely loses more marks in that regard. But hey, at least the packaging saves the day. It has a pretty nice stand to put the poster on, but apart from that, it's just a shame there's so much ugliness on the inside. So with the penultimate figure on the list, we're going back to the carbonized line, as my number 2 spot is going to the carbonized Ahsoka. That's right, Ahsoka. Ahsoka of all characters got the carbonized treatment, and of course it is that older Mando figure Hasbro can't stop re-releasing, but this one here came out in an Amazon exclusive 2-pack alongside the carbonized red HK Assassin droid, which looks fine. Giving Ahsoka a shiny paint job is just a brain-dead lazy idea, and it's definitely Hasbro scraping the bottom of the barrel. Like I said before, there are figures that would suit a metallic look, like some droids such as Hu Yang, or characters who have metal armor like Sabine, both of which would have been far less retarded choices. But out of pure stupidity, Ahsoka was chosen for some reason, and they ended up giving her shiny Laiku and also made her robe shiny because that makes sense and fits this theme really well. But I guess it could have been much worse, as they could have carbonized her skin, which would have been pure nightmare fuel. But regardless, this still is one of the most stupidest Black Series releases ever, and honestly it was a really strong contender for my number 1 pick. But there is another figure that is more deserving to be crowned as the absolute worst Black Series figure of 2023, and it is of course the OG red HK Assassin droid from the Ahsoka show, which was number 6 in the line and was somehow a mainline release. And my god, this one is such a disaster, and it's truly surprising how Hasbro managed to fuck it up so bad, considering it should have just been a straightforward repaint. Yet this actually looks like an unfinished product, and is such a downgrade from the original HK droid release that was actually really cool. It's just shameful. This one, however, does offer a few minor differences. I mean, it still doesn't give us the staff, but the soft goods is a little different, and also the colouring is too, because this one, like I said, is red. And let me tell you something, this paint job does not look good in the slightest. I mean, they didn't even bother to paint the visor on, as they just left the entire head one solid red colour, which looks super ugly, and overall it just comes off looking way too plasticky. I know the figure is made out of plastic, obviously, but you know what I mean, it looks like a prototype. And you know it's bad when the carbonized version looks superior, as even though that particular repaint isn't great, at least it has a proper paint job with thought put into it, because that darker red is more accurate to the version seen from the show. As like I said, this paint really doesn't do this figure any justice. I get Hasbro may have wanted to give us something unique in terms of aesthetics. If it looked like this, it would have been so much cooler, but the execution was honestly rushed and pitiful. In fact, if anyone on the Star Wars team can say with a straight face that this is what they intended the final product to look like upon release, they deserve to be fired. I know it sounds harsh, but why on earth are we receiving figures of this low quality for what, £24? It's ridiculous, especially when they can't even get simple repaints right. And because of all those reasons, this red HK can't not be the worst figure of the year, as it is quite evidently an embarrassment to the Black Series line. So there we have it, my picks for the worst Black Series figures of 2023. And I guess because I have been a little harsh on Hasbro this entire video, I'll end by saying, looking back at the year as a whole, the Black Series team definitely did well, despite having some seriously low points, and when I say low I mean low. It has been a pretty great year for the line nevertheless. Maybe not their strongest though, as despite the fact we did see some long overdue characters debut in 6-inch finally, a lot were far from perfect and were ultimately quite underwhelming, with some figures that almost made this list including the Magna Guard, ARC Trooper Jesse and also Pre Vizsla. Also I'll just finally mention why the Christmas figures weren't on this list, and even though I don't really care for them, this year did have some creative ones, so I laid off them for once. The rest of the figures this year though ranged from good to incredible, and some were near perfect, so I promise to have my top 10 best 2023 video out soon. But in the meantime, let me know in the comments down below your least favourite figure from this year, and also if you agreed in my list. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.